Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished mopping the office floors. It was past midnight, and the building was empty except for the security guard who barely looked up from his phone. This was his third job of the day. Every morning, he worked at a small cafe making coffee and sandwiches. Afternoons were spent delivering food on his old bicycle that made terrible noises. Nights belonged to cleaning offices until the early hours. His clothes were old and patched in several places. His shoes had holes that he covered with tape. The other employees at the cafe often made jokes about his appearance, but Marcus ignored them. He had bigger dreams than they could imagine. Sarah worked at the same cafe as a manager. She was beautiful, smart, and came from a wealthy family. Marcus had liked her for months, but never found the courage to talk to her about anything, other than work. Every day, he watched her laugh with customers who drove expensive cars and wore designer clothes. She seemed to live in a completely different world. One rainy Thursday, Marcus finally decided to ask Sarah out for coffee after work. His hands were shaking as he approached her near the cash register. The cafe was almost empty, with only two customers sitting by the window. "Sarah, I was wondering if maybe you would like to have dinner with me this weekend?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah looked up from counting the money. Her expression changed from surprise to something that looked like pity mixed with disgust. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then stepped closer to him. "Marcus, you're a nice guy, but we're not compatible. You work 3 jobs just to pay rent. I drive a car that costs more than you make in a year. My friends wouldn't understand, and honestly, neither would I. Maybe you should focus on someone more realistic for your situation." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. He nodded slowly, trying to keep his face calm, even though he felt like disappearing into the ground. "I understand. Sorry for asking." As he walked away, he heard Sarah talking to her friend Jessica, who had just arrived to pick her up. "Can you believe he actually asked me out? I mean, look at him. His clothes are falling apart, and he rides that horrible bicycle everywhere. Some people really don't know their place." Jessica laughed. "Poor people always think they have a chance with us. It's almost cute how clueless they are." Marcus pretended. He didn't hear them, but every word burned in his memory. He finished his shift in silence, then rode his noisy bicycle through the dark streets to his next job. The rain had stopped, but he felt colder than ever. At the office building, he met Linda, who worked the night shift at a nearby restaurant. She was taking a smoke break outside when she saw him locking up his bicycle. "You look terrible," she said, not unkindly. "Rough day?" Marcus had known Linda for a few months. She was in her 30s, divorced, and worked 2 jobs to support her young daughter. Unlike Sarah, Linda understood what it meant to struggle. But when Marcus had asked her out a few weeks ago, she had also said no. "I like you, Marcus. I really do. But I need stability. My daughter needs stability. You're working so hard just to survive, and I can't take that risk. I need someone who can help me build a secure future, not someone who's still trying to figure out his own." Standing in the cold night air, Marcus remembered Linda's words along with Sarah's cruel laughter. 2 different women, 2 different reasons, but the same result. He wasn't good enough because he was poor. As he entered the building to start cleaning, Marcus made a promise to himself. One day, he would prove them all wrong. He didn't know how yet, but he would find a way to rise above this life. The rejection hurt, but it also lit a fire inside him that had been burning quietly for years. He thought about his grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. She used to tell him, "Marcus, the world will try to make you feel small because of where you come from. But never forget that diamonds are made under pressure, and gold is purified by fire." His grandmother had died 3 years ago, leaving him completely alone in the world. She never got to see him graduate from high school or start working. She never knew that he spent every free moment at the public library, reading books about business, technology, and success stories of people who had started with nothing. Marcus had a secret that none of his co-workers knew about. For the past 2 years, he had been learning computer programming online using the free internet at the library. He stayed there until closing time every day he could, watching tutorial videos and practicing coding. His dream was to create something that would change his life completely. But dreams felt far away when you were surrounded by people who looked at you like you were worthless. As Marcus pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway, he wondered if he was fooling himself. Maybe Sarah and Linda were right. Maybe he should be more realistic about his place in the world. The building was quiet except for the sound of his footsteps and the wheels of his cart. In a few hours, the sun would rise, and he would start another day of serving coffee to people who saw him as invisible. But tonight, in the silence of the empty offices, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would not let their rejection define him. Instead, he would use it as fuel to build something bigger than any of them could imagine. 6 months after Sarah's rejection, Marcus had developed a routine that would have exhausted most people. He still worked his 3 jobs, but now he spent every free moment at the library working on his secret project. The librarians knew him by name and always saved him a computer in the back corner where he could work undisturbed. His project was a mobile app that would help small businesses manage their customers and inventory. Marcus had noticed that many of the restaurants and shops he delivered food to were struggling with old-fashioned paper systems. They lost orders, forgot customer preferences, and often ran out of popular items because they couldn't track sales properly. The app was almost finished, but Marcus needed money to launch it properly. Every dollar he earned went to basic survival, rent, food, and keeping his bicycle running. He had saved exactly $43 over the past 6 months, which wasn't nearly enough. At the cafe, things had gotten worse. Sarah had been promoted to assistant manager, and she seemed to enjoy making Marcus's life difficult. She gave him the worst shifts, made him clean the bathroom multiple times per day, and often criticized his work in front of customers. "Marcus, table 6 is still dirty. Do I need to show you how to wipe a table properly?" she said loudly one busy morning, making sure everyone could hear. Marcus quietly grabbed his cleaning supplies and went to fix the table that was already perfectly clean. He had learned not to argue or defend himself. Every comment, every insult, every moment of humiliation was just more fuel for his determination. During his break, Marcus sat in the small employee room and opened an old notebook where he had been writing down ideas for his business. A new waitress named Amy walked in and sat down across from him. Amy was young, probably fresh out of college, with bright eyes and an expensive handbag. She had started working at the cafe a few weeks ago, but Marcus could tell she was just passing time before finding something better. Her family clearly had money. Her clothes were always perfect, and she drove a new car. "What are you writing?" Amy asked, genuinely curious. Marcus hesitated. He had never told anyone about his app, but something about Amy seemed different from Sarah. She had never been mean to him, and she actually said please and thank you when asking him to do things. "Just some ideas," he said carefully. "For what? You always look so focused when you're writing." Marcus looked around to make sure they were alone. "I'm working on a business app, something to help small companies organize their operations better." Amy's eyes widened with interest. "Really? That sounds amazing! I studied business in college. Have you thought about funding? There are investors who specialize in apps." "I don't have the connections for that kind of thing," Marcus said with a small smile. "People like me don't usually get meetings with investors." Amy was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "You know, my father works in venture capital. Maybe I could—" "Amy, what are you doing back here with him?" Sarah's voice cut through their conversation like ice. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, looking disgusted. "I need you to help with the lunch rush, not waste time talking to the cleaner." Amy looked embarrassed. "We were just nothing. Come on." Sarah grabbed Amy's arm and pulled her toward the door. As they left, Marcus heard Sarah whisper loudly, "Trust me, you don't want to get too friendly with Marcus. He gets the wrong idea about women who are nice to him. He actually asked me out once. Can you imagine?" Amy glanced back at Marcus with an apologetic look, but she didn't say anything. Marcus watched them go, feeling the familiar sting of humiliation. For a brief moment, he had thought someone might actually be interested in his ideas. But Sarah was right. Amy lived in a different world, and she would never really take him seriously. That evening, while cleaning offices, Marcus ran into Tom, a security guard who had become friendly over the months. Tom was in his 50s, divorced, and worked nights to pay child support for 3 kids. "You look more tired than usual," Tom observed as Marcus emptied trash bins. "Everything okay?" Marcus told him about his app and his conversation with Amy. Tom listened without judgment, nodding occasionally. "You know what your problem is?" Tom said when Marcus finished. "You're waiting for permission from people who will never give it to you. Rich folks like that girl, Amy. They mean well sometimes, but when push comes to shove, they stick with their own kind. You think her father is going to invest in some poor kid from the cafe? Not likely. So what am I supposed to do?" Marcus asked. "Stop looking up and start looking around. There are other people like us who understand what it's like to struggle. Maybe they can't write big checks, but they know how to work hard and spot a good idea." Tom was quiet for a moment, then continued. "My brother-in-law runs a small restaurant across town. He's always complaining about losing orders and not knowing what customers want. Maybe you should show him your app instead of dreaming about fancy investors." Marcus had never thought about starting small like that. He had been so focused on the big picture that he missed the obvious first step. "You think he would be interested?" "Won't know until you ask. But I'll tell you this, he judges people by their work, not their bank account. And if your app really works, he'll use it." As Marcus continued his cleaning, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe he had been looking for validation from the wrong people. Sarah, Linda, Amy, they all lived in a world where money determined worth. But there was another world full of people like Tom, like his brother-in-law, like Marcus himself. People who understood that good ideas could come from anywhere. 3 days later, Marcus asked Tom to arrange a meeting. He spent his lunch break at the library preparing a simple presentation on his phone. He didn't have fancy slides or a polished pitch, but he had something better, a solution to a real problem that he understood completely. The restaurant owner, Mike, was a heavy-set man in his 40s with calloused hands and a tired smile. His small Italian restaurant was busy but chaotic. Orders were written on scraps of paper that often got lost. He had no idea which dishes were most popular or which customers came in most often. Marcus showed him the app, explaining how it could track orders, customer preferences, and inventory all in one place. Mike watched intently, asking practical questions about cost and ease of use. "How much?" Mike asked when Marcus finished. "I was thinking $50 per month," Marcus said nervously. Mike laughed. "Kid, I lose more than that every week from mixed-up orders and wasted food. If this thing works like you say it does, I'll pay you $100. For the first time in months, Marcus felt genuine hope. It wasn't the glamorous startup story he had imagined, but it was real. It was a beginning. Mike became Marcus's first paying customer, and the results were immediate. Within 2 weeks, the restaurant was running smoother than it had in years. Orders stopped getting lost, popular dishes were always in stock, and Mike could see exactly which customers were his best regulars. Word spread quickly among other small business owners in the neighborhood. Marcus started getting calls from restaurant owners, small retail shops, and service businesses. Each new customer paid him between $50 and $100 per month. Within 3 months, he was making more from his app than from all three of his regular jobs combined. But Marcus was smart enough not to quit his jobs immediately. He had learned to be cautious about money, and he wanted to build a solid foundation before making any big changes. Instead, he began reducing his hours gradually, starting with the food delivery job that had been the hardest on his aging bicycle. The cafe? Sarah noticed that Marcus seemed different. He was still doing his work perfectly, but there was something in his manner that she couldn't quite identify. He seemed more confident, less affected by her criticism. It bothered her in a way she couldn't explain. One afternoon, Amy approached Marcus during his break again. This time, she made sure Sarah wasn't around. "I've been thinking about our conversation from a few months ago," she said quietly. "About your app idea. Did you ever do anything with it?" Marcus looked at her carefully. After Sarah's humiliation, he had been hesitant to trust Amy's interest, but her question seemed genuine. "Actually, yes. It's been going pretty well." Amy's face lit up. "Really? That's amazing. How did you get started? Did you find investors?" "I found customers instead," Marcus said simply. "Started with one restaurant and it grew from there." "That's incredible. I mean, going straight to customers is actually much smarter than looking for investors first. Most successful businesses start exactly like that." Amy paused, looking impressed. "How many customers do you have now?" 15, with 3 more starting next week. Amy's eyes widened. She had studied business in college and understood what those numbers meant. "Marcus, that's a real business. You're an entrepreneur." For the first time, someone had called Marcus an entrepreneur instead of just a worker. The word felt strange, but good. He had been so focused on the day-to-day challenges that he hadn't stepped back to see what he was actually building. Their conversation was interrupted by Jessica, Sarah's friend, who walked into the break room looking for Amy. "There. You are. Sarah's looking for you. We're all going shopping after work and then dinner at that new place downtown. You should come with us." Amy glanced at Marcus, then back at Jessica. "Actually, I can't tonight. I have some things to take care of." Jessica shrugged and left, but not before giving Marcus a dismissive look that made it clear she thought Amy was wasting her time talking to him. After Jessica was gone, Amy turned back to Marcus. "I meant what I said earlier. What you're doing is really impressive. Most people just complain about their problems, but you actually built a solution." Marcus felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. Amy's words meant more to him than she probably realized. But he also remembered Tom's warning about expecting too much from people like Amy when things got serious. That evening, Marcus had a meeting with his biggest potential customer yet, a small chain of 3 electronics stores. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had heard about Marcus's app from Mike at the restaurant. She was tired of losing track of inventory and wanted a simple system to manage all 3 locations. The meeting went well, and Mrs. Chen agreed to a 3-month trial for all 3 stores. The contract would bring in $600 per month, more than Marcus made at the cafe. As he walked home that night, Marcus realized he had reached a turning point. His app income was now higher than his traditional job income, and it was growing every week. More importantly, he was building something that actually helped people solve real problems. But the biggest change wasn't in his bank account. It was in how he saw himself. For years, he had accepted other people's judgment that he wasn't good enough because he was poor. Sarah's rejection had hurt so much because part of him believed she was right. Now, he was beginning to understand that his value wasn't determined by his circumstances, but by what he chose to do with them. Marcus decided it was time to make his first major decision as a business owner. He gave his 2 weeks' notice at the food delivery job. The manager barely looked up when Marcus handed in his resignation. "Okay, whatever. We'll find someone else." Marcus smiled as he walked out. 6 months ago, losing any job would have terrified him. Now, it felt like freedom. At the cafe, he decided to keep working for a while longer. The steady paycheck was still useful, and he enjoyed the irony of building his business empire while Sarah continued to treat him like he was worthless. Every day, she unknowingly provided him with more motivation to succeed. One morning, Marcus overheard Sarah talking to the cafe owner, Mr. Peterson, about expanding the business. "We should really modernize our ordering system," Sarah was saying. "Maybe get one of those apps that tracks customer orders and preferences. I've heard they can really boost profits?" Mr. Peterson nodded. "That sounds expensive, though. Do you know any companies that do that kind of thing?" Marcus continued wiping tables, but he was listening carefully. Sarah had no idea that the solution she was describing was sitting 20 feet away from her, created by the man she had rejected for being too poor and insignificant. "I'll ask around," Sarah said. "My friend Amy might know some people. She went to business school." Marcus almost laughed out loud. Sarah was going to ask Amy to help find the exact service that Marcus was already providing to dozens of other businesses. The situation was so perfectly ironic that it felt like something from a movie. That afternoon, Amy approached Marcus with an excited expression. "I have a crazy coincidence to tell you about," she said. "Sarah was just asking me if I knew anyone who makes business apps like the one you created. She wants to find something for this cafe. Isn't that funny?" Marcus nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Very funny. You should talk to Mr. Peterson directly. I bet he would love to hear about your app." Marcus considered this. Part of him wanted to enjoy the dramatic irony of the situation, watching Sarah unknowingly search for a solution that was right under her nose. But the practical businessman in him recognized a good opportunity. "Maybe I will," he said quietly. Amy smiled. "I think you should. And Marcus, don't let Sarah make you feel like you're not good enough to pitch your own business. You've built something real here. Act like it." Marcus spent the weekend preparing for the most important business meeting of his life. Not because Mr. Peterson was his biggest potential customer, he already had larger clients, but because this would be the moment he stepped out of the shadows at the cafe and revealed who he really was. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Marcus came to work as usual, but instead of his worn cleaning clothes, he wore his best shirt and pants. They weren't expensive, but they were clean and pressed. He had even bought new shoes over the weekend, his first clothing purchase in over a year, Sarah noticed immediately. "Why are you dressed up? Do you have a job interview somewhere else?" She sounded hopeful, as if him leaving would solve all her problems. "Something like that," Marcus replied calmly. At 10 o'clock, during the morning lull between breakfast and lunch rush, Marcus approached Mr. Peterson's office. The cafe owner was a fair man in his 60s who had always treated Marcus with basic respect. Unlike Sarah, Marcus knocked on the open door. "Mr. Peterson, do you have a few minutes? I heard you were interested in modernizing the ordering system." Mr. Peterson looked up from his paperwork, surprised to see Marcus in his doorway. "Oh, hello, Marcus. Yes, Sarah mentioned something about that. Do you know someone who does that kind of work?" "Actually, I do that kind of work." Mr. Peterson's expression shifted from confusion to curiosity. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" Marcus took a deep breath. "For the past year, I've been developing and running a business management app. I currently have 22 small business clients who use my system to track orders, manage inventory, and analyze customer data. I think it could help the cafe, too." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Mr. Peterson stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. "You're serious?" Mr. Peterson finally asked. "Completely serious. Would you like to see a demonstration?" Mr. Peterson nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I would." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the app. For the next 15 minutes, he walked Mr. Peterson through the features, showing real data from his other restaurant clients. He explained how the system could track which menu items were most popular at different times of day, identify the cafe's best customers, and reduce waste by predicting inventory needs. Mr. Peterson asked detailed questions and Marcus answered, each one with the confidence of someone who had spent months solving these exact problems for other businesses. By the end of the demonstration, Mr. Peterson was leaning forward in his chair, clearly excited. "This is exactly what we need," Mr. Peterson said. "How much would it cost?" "For a business this size, I typically charge $75 per month." "That's very reasonable. When could we start?" "I could have you set up by tomorrow afternoon if you'd like." Mr. Peterson stood up and extended his hand. "Marcus, I have to say I'm impressed. I had no idea you were running your own business. Why didn't you mention this before?" Marcus shook his hand. "I wanted to make sure it was successful before I talked about it." "Well, it certainly sounds successful. How many employees do you have?" "Right now, it's just me. But I'm planning to hire help soon." As they finished their meeting, Sarah appeared in the doorway. She had obviously been listening from the hallway, and her face showed a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What's going on?" she asked, looking back and forth between Marcus and Mr. Peterson. "Sarah, great timing," Mr. Peterson said enthusiastically. "You'll be happy to know I found a solution for our ordering system. Marcus here runs a tech company that specializes in exactly what we need." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Marcus? Our Marcus?" "Yes, our Marcus. Apparently, he's been building quite a successful business while working here. We're going to be his newest client." Sarah looked at Marcus like she had never seen him before. "But how is that possible?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I've been working on it for over a year. Started with one restaurant and grew from there. But you work 3 jobs. You ride that old bicycle. Your clothes." Sarah's voice trailed off as she realized how shallow she sounded. "I still do those things," Marcus said calmly. "But I also run a business that serves 22 clients and generates more revenue each month than I make from all my traditional jobs combined." Mr. Peterson was watching this exchange with interest. "Sarah, you seem surprised. Didn't you know Marcus was an entrepreneur?" Sarah's face was turning red. "No, we never really talked about, he never mentioned—" "I mentioned it to some people," Marcus said quietly, glancing at Sarah with a look that reminded her of their conversation months ago. "But not everyone was interested in hearing about it." Amy appeared in the doorway behind Sarah, drawn by the unusual gathering in Mr. Peterson's office. When she saw Marcus standing there in his good clothes, talking to Mr. Peterson as an equal, she smiled broadly. "Is this about your app business?" Amy asked Marcus. "Did you finally tell Mr. Peterson about it?" Sarah spun around to face Amy. "You knew about this?" "Of course I knew. Marcus has been building an amazing business. I've been trying to convince him for months that he should pitch it to Mr. Peterson." Sarah looked back at Marcus, her expression showing a dawning realization of how badly she had misjudged him. "Marcus, I had no idea." "I know," Marcus said simply. "Most people see what they expect to see." Mr. Peterson clapped his hands together. "Well, this is wonderful news all around. Marcus, I'll have the paperwork ready this afternoon. Sarah, you'll work with Marcus to implement the new system. I'm sure you two can coordinate the details." As Mr. Peterson sat back down at his desk, clearly considering the meeting over, Sarah found herself alone in the hallway with Marcus and Amy. The silence was uncomfortable. "I should get back to work," Marcus said, starting to walk away. "Marcus, wait!" Sarah called after him. He stopped and turned around. "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. Very wrong." Marcus nodded but didn't say anything. Sarah took a deep breath. Would you maybe like to have dinner this weekend? I'd like to hear more about your business." Amy looked back and forth between them, sensing the deeper history behind Sarah's invitation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Sarah, I appreciate the apology. But I asked you out months ago, and you made it very clear that we weren't compatible because I was poor. Now that you know I'm not as poor as you thought, you're interested. That tells me that nothing has really changed about how you see people." Sarah's face went pale. "That's not... I mean, it's not just about money, isn't it?" Marcus asked gently. "Yesterday you thought I was worthless. Today you think I'm worth dating. The only thing that changed was your perception of my bank account." Sarah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She knew he was right. "I hope we can work together professionally," Marcus continued. "But personally, I think we want different things from life." As Marcus walked away, Amy caught up with him near the coffee machines. "That was handled very well," she said quietly. "A lot of people would have been cruel in that situation." Marcus shrugged. "Being cruel wouldn't change anything. Besides, she taught me something important, even if she didn't mean to." "What's that?" "That I don't need anyone's permission to be successful. The only person who has to believe in me is me." 6 months after the cafe incident, Marcus's life had transformed completely. His app business now served over 60 clients across 3 cities, and he had hired 2 part-time programmers to help with development and customer support. He had moved from his tiny apartment to a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom place with a proper office space. Most importantly, he had finally quit all his traditional jobs. The last one to go was the cafe, which he left on good terms with Mr. Peterson. His app had increased the cafe's profits by 30%, making him one of Mr. Peterson's favorite people. Sarah had been professional during their business relationship, but Marcus could see the regret in her eyes every time they interacted. She had started dressing more conservatively and speaking more softly around him, as if trying to present herself as a different person than the one who had rejected him so cruelly. Amy had become a genuine friend. She often asked for business advice, and Marcus was happy to share what he had learned. Unlike Sarah, Amy's interest in him hadn't changed based on his financial success. She had seen his potential before anyone else and had never treated him differently because of his circumstances. One evening, while Marcus was working late in his new office, he received an unexpected phone call. The caller introduced himself as David Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew, and a venture capital investor from the city. "My aunt has been telling me about your app," David said. "She says it's transformed how she runs her stores. I'd like to meet with you to discuss potential investment opportunities." Marcus was surprised. He had intentionally avoided seeking investment, preferring to grow his business organically with revenue from customers. But David's call intrigued him. They met the following week at an upscale coffee shop downtown. David was a well-dressed man in his 30s who carried himself with the confidence that came from old money and elite education. Marcus wore his best clothes but still felt underdressed compared to David's expensive suit. "I've done some research on your business," David began after they ordered coffee. "Your customer retention rate is remarkable. 97% of your clients are still using your service after 6 months. That's almost unheard of in the app business." Marcus nodded. "I focus on solving real problems for small business owners. If the app doesn't save them more money than it costs, they won't keep paying for it. That's exactly the kind of practical thinking that interests me. Most app developers focus on flashy features, but you've built something genuinely useful." David leaned forward. "I'd like to offer you $500,000 for a 30% stake in your company." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "I'm sorry, how much?" $500,000. "Based on your current revenue and growth rate, I believe your company could be worth $10 million within 3 years. Marcus stared at David, trying to process what he was hearing. A year ago, he had been mopping floors and getting rejected by women who thought he wasn't good enough because he was poor. Now a venture capitalist was offering him $500,000. That's an incredible offer," Marcus said slowly. "But I need to think about it." David smiled. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But I hope you'll consider it seriously." With proper funding, you could expand much faster. Hire a real development team, invest in marketing, maybe even go national. After David left, Marcus sat in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at his phone. The offer would change everything. He could quit worrying about money forever, hire employees, maybe even start dating without wondering if women were interested in him or his bank account. But something about the conversation bothered him. David's offer was generous, but it came with strings attached. Marcus would have to give up control of the company he had built from nothing. He would have to answer to investors and worry about their expectations instead of just focusing on helping his customers. That evening, Marcus called Tom, the security guard who had first encouraged him to think small instead of dreaming big. Tom had become an informal mentor and one of the few people whose advice Marcus completely trusted. $500,000? Tom whistled low. That's life-changing money, kid. I know, but something doesn't feel right about it. What's bothering you? Marcus thought for a moment. I built this business to prove that I was worth something. If I take investor money, does that mean I still need someone else's validation to succeed? Tom was quiet for a long moment. That's a smart question. But here's another one. What do you want to accomplish with your business? Is it just about proving yourself, or do you want to help more people? I want to help more people. Then maybe the question isn't whether you need their money, but whether their money helps you serve more customers. Over the next week, Marcus wrestled with the decision. He researched David's investment firm and found that they had a good reputation for working with small business owners rather than trying to control them. The money would indeed allow him to expand faster and help more customers. But Marcus also remembered something his grandmother used to say. Never make important decisions when you're hungry, angry, or trying to prove something to someone else. Was he considering this offer because it would genuinely help his business, or because he wanted to show Sarah and everyone else how successful he had become? The answer came to him during a meeting with Mike, his first customer. The restaurant owner was telling Marcus about his brother, who ran a small grocery store in another state and was struggling with inventory management. I told him about your app, but he says he can't afford even $50 a month right now. His store is barely breaking even, Mike said sadly. Marcus realized that there were thousands of small business owners like Mike's brother, people who needed help but couldn't afford the current pricing structure. With investment money, he could develop a lower-cost version of his app specifically for struggling businesses. He called David the next day and accepted the offer, but with conditions. The money would be used primarily for product development and customer support, not marketing or expansion. Marcus would retain majority control of the company and final say over all major decisions. David agreed to the conditions, impressed by Marcus's thoughtful approach to the investment. 2 weeks later, Marcus was signing contracts in David's downtown office when he ran into someone unexpected in the elevator. Linda, the night shift restaurant worker who had rejected him months earlier, was leaving a job interview on the same floor. "Marcus," she said, clearly shocked to see him in an expensive office building wearing a tailored suit. "What are you doing here?" "Business meeting," Marcus said simply. Linda looked at his expensive clothes and the professional briefcase he was carrying. "You look different. Really different." "I feel different," Marcus admitted. The elevator was slow, giving them time to talk. Linda seemed nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap. "I heard you don't work at the cafe anymore," she said finally. "That's right. I started my own company." Linda's eyes widened. "Your own company? Doing what?" Marcus explained briefly about his app business and the investment he had just secured. Linda listened with growing amazement. "I can't believe it," she said softly. "When I knew you, you were working 3 jobs just to survive. Now you're signing business deals downtown. That's incredible." The elevator reached the ground floor, but neither of them moved to get out. "Marcus," Linda said quietly, "I owe you an apology. When you asked me out, I said no, because I thought you couldn't provide stability. I was wrong about what stability really means. Marcus looked at her carefully. What do you mean? Stability isn't about having money. It's about having the drive and intelligence to create opportunities. You had that all along. I just couldn't see it because I was too focused on the surface. Marcus appreciated her honesty, but he could see the real question behind her words. Linda, if you're wondering whether this changes things between us, I need to be honest. You rejected me because you thought I wasn't successful enough. Now that I am successful, you're reconsidering. That pattern doesn't feel like something I want to build a relationship on. Linda nodded sadly. I understand. I wanted you to know that I realize I made a mistake, not just in saying no, but in how I judged your character. I appreciate that, Marcus said gently, and for what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person. You were trying to make practical decisions for yourself and your daughter. I can respect that, even if it hurt at the time. As they parted ways outside the building, Marcus felt a sense of closure he hadn't expected. Linda's apology was sincere, but it also confirmed something important. His success hadn't changed who he was, but it had revealed who other people really were. That evening, Marcus celebrated his investment deal with Amy and Tom at a nice restaurant. It was a far cry from the cheap diners he used to frequent, but Marcus insisted on paying for everyone. So what's next? Amy asked over dessert. With $500,000, you could probably expand anywhere you want. Marcus smiled. Actually, I want to start by helping businesses that can't afford the full version of my app. There are a lot of small owners out there who need help, but don't have much money. I want to build something for them. Tom raised his glass. Now that's the Marcus I know. Success didn't change your heart. Amy clinked her glass against Tom's. Here's to. 2 years later, Marcus stood on the stage of the city's biggest business conference, looking out at an audience of 500 entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders. He was the keynote speaker for From Startup to Success, sharing his story of building a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. His app business now served over 3,000 clients in 12 states. He had a team of 15 employees working from a modern office building downtown. More importantly, he had launched Small Biz Helper, a simplified version of his app that cost only $15 per month, specifically designed for struggling businesses that couldn't afford the full version. The cheaper app had been wildly successful, helping over 8,000 small business owners improve their operations. Marcus had also started a scholarship program that provided free business consulting to entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds. As he finished his speech about persistence and believing in yourself despite rejection, the audience gave him a standing ovation. During the networking reception afterward, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand and exchange business cards. In the crowd, he spotted a familiar face. Sarah was standing near the back of the room, wearing an elegant dress and holding a glass of wine. She looked nervous but determined as she made her way toward him. "Hello, Marcus," she said when she finally reached him during a brief lull in the conversation. "Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm working for a marketing company now. We specialize in promoting small businesses." She paused, then added, "Your speech was inspiring." "Really?" Marcus nodded politely. "Thank you. How are things at the cafe?" Actually, Mr. Peterson sold it last year and retired. The new owners kept your app system, though. They said it was the most valuable part of the business. There was an awkward silence. Sarah clearly wanted to say something more, but Marcus didn't try to fill the quiet space. "Marcus," she finally said, "I know this might sound crazy, but would you be interested in having dinner sometime? I'd love to catch up and hear more about your journey." Marcus looked at her carefully. Sarah was still beautiful, still charming, still exactly the type of person who had once seemed impossibly out of his reach. But now he could see her clearly. Not as someone superior to him, but as someone who had never learned to look beyond the surface. Sarah, I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think that would be a good idea. Is it because of what happened before? Because I've changed, Marcus. I've learned a lot about what really matters. Marcus considered her words. Maybe you have changed, but the reason I'm saying no isn't about punishment or holding grudges. It's because we fundamentally see the world differently. What do you mean? You're asking me out now because I'm successful and wealthy. That's not necessarily wrong. People are attracted to success. But it tells me that your interest in me is still based on external circumstances rather than who I am as a person. Sarah started to protest, but Marcus continued gently. 2 years ago, I was the same person I am today. I had the same values, the same work ethic, the same dreams. The only thing that's changed is my bank account and my reputation. If those things are what make me attractive to you now, then we're not compatible. Sarah's face showed a mixture of sadness and understanding. You're right, she said quietly. I wish I had been smart enough to see who you really were back then. We all learn at our own pace, Marcus said kindly. I hope you find what you're looking for. As Sarah walked away, Marcus felt someone approach from behind. He turned to find Amy, who had been watching the conversation from across the room. That looked like it went well, Amy said with a slight smile. It did, actually. No drama, no hard feelings, just honesty. Amy had started her own business consulting firm the previous year, partly inspired by watching Marcus's success. They had remained close friends, and Marcus often referred clients to her when they needed help beyond what his app could provide. You know, Amy said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about something lately. What's that? When I first met you at the cafe, I was genuinely interested in your ideas and your potential. But I also wonder, if we had started dating back then, would I have really understood what you were going through? Would I have been supportive during the hardest parts? Or would I have tried to convince you to take an easier path? Marcus appreciated her honesty. That's a fair question. Why are you thinking about it now? Because I've realized that sometimes rejection is a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one. Sarah and Linda rejecting you forced you to build something entirely on your own. If someone had believed in you early on, you might have taken shortcuts or compromised your vision. Marcus nodded slowly. You might be right. I learned to trust my own judgment because I had to. If I had found support too early, I might never have developed that independence. Amy was quiet for a moment, then said, I have a confession to make. I've always been a little bit interested in you romantically, but I never said anything because I wasn't sure if it was real attraction or just fascination with your success story. Marcus looked at her with surprise. In all their conversations about business and life, romantic feelings had never come up directly. And now, he asked, now I know it's real because it's based on watching how you treat people. You were kind to Sarah just now. Even though she hurt you, you create jobs for people from backgrounds like yours. You build products that actually help instead of just making money. Those are the things that matter to me. Marcus smiled. Amy, you've been one of my closest friends through all of this. You saw potential in me before anyone else did, and you never made me feel like I needed to prove my worth to you. So what does that mean? Amy asked with a nervous laugh. It means I'd love to take you to dinner sometime, not as a business networking event, but as two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. Amy's face lit up. I'd like that very much. As the reception continued around them, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. 3 years ago, he had been a poor young man getting rejected by women who couldn't see past his circumstances. Now he was a successful entrepreneur, surrounded by people who wanted to be associated with his success. But the most important lesson hadn't been about building wealth or gaining status. It had been about learning to value himself regardless of other people's opinions. The rejection that had seemed so devastating at the time had actually been the catalyst for discovering his own strength and capabilities. Sarah and Linda had rejected him because they thought he wasn't good enough. Now they were interested because they thought he was successful enough. But Amy had always seen him as good enough, exactly as he was. That difference made all the difference. As Marcus looked around the room full of successful business people, he realized that true success wasn't about proving yourself to people who had rejected you. It was about building something meaningful and surrounding yourself with people who valued you for the right reasons. The poor young man who had been mopping floors and getting turned down for dates was still inside him, but now that man was a source of strength rather than shame. Every day, Marcus remembered where he came from, and it made him grateful for where he was going. The greatest victory wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the knowledge that he had built it all himself, one customer at a time with no one's permission but his own.